My name is Vivian. For years, my family looked at me and saw nothing but a quiet, low-level failure, someone completely invisible in their world of high society ambition. I let them believe that lie. What they didn't know was that I possessed a secret that controlled their entire financial survival. I was willing to keep the peace, but when they crossed a line so deeply insulting that it changed everything, I decided it was time to end the game. On a seemingly ordinary Monday morning, they walked into a room expecting the absolute pinnacle of their success, only to find themselves completely trapped by a reality they never saw coming. I didn't shout, and I didn't argue. I just used their own greed to quietly dismantle everything they owned in less than 5 minutes. Before I show you how the quietest person in the room executed the perfect trap, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Now, before the curtain rises, leave a comment below. Where are you watching this video from, and exactly what time is it on your clock right now? Let's begin. In the American business world, there is a distinct difference between old money, new money, and loud money. I prefer silent power. For the past 10 years, I have quietly built Vance Enterprises from a small midtown office into one of the most aggressive investment firms in New York. I control assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but if you looked at my daily routine, you wouldn't know it. I drive a standard sedan, wear unbranded tailored suits, and live in a modest apartment. To me, wealth is about leverage and security, not applause. My parents, Margaret and Richard, operate on a completely different frequency. To them, success doesn't exist unless it is broadcasted on social media or printed on a flashy luxury logo. Because I chose not to subsidize their lifestyle or brag about my career, they stamped me as the family failure years ago. They convinced themselves that my quiet life was a cover for professional stagnation. I never corrected them. In business, you never show your cards until the final bet is placed. Instead of valuing substance, my parents dedicated all their admiration to my sister, Chloe, and our cousin, Carter. Chloe is 30 years old, chronically unemployed, and masters the art of looking busy while doing absolutely nothing. Carter is a manipulative opportunist who bounces from one failed startup to another, surviving entirely on credit card debt and cheap charisma. Yet, in my parents' eyes, they are the golden children. They speak the language of superficial success that Margaret and Richard crave. Last month, during a mandatory family dinner at an upscale Manhattan restaurant that Carter couldn't actually afford, the dynamic was on full display. Richard looked at me across the table, shaking his head. "Vivian, you need to fix your life," he said, adjusting his watch so everyone could see it. "Carter just secured a seed round for his new venture, and Chloe is networking with high society influencers. What exactly are you doing with your life?" I took a sip of my water, perfectly calm. "I manage investments, Dad," I replied. Margaret sighed loudly, rolling her eyes. "Investments? You mean helping retail workers open savings accounts? Look at your cousin. That is real ambition." Carter offered a smug smile, leaning back in his chair. "Let her be, Aunt Margaret," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Not everyone is cut out for the fast lane. Some people are meant to stay at the bottom of the ladder." I didn't argue. I didn't defend my portfolio or mention that Vance Enterprises had just acquired the very building Carter's fake startup rented. Arguing with financially illiterate people is a waste of corporate time. I simply watched them order the most expensive items on the menu, knowing Carter would quietly ask Richard to split the bill later. They lived in an illusion of grandeur, fueled by my parents' blind worship and their own desperate need for validation. For years, I tolerated their dismissive comments. I viewed their ignorance as a minor tax for maintaining family peace. But the dynamic was becoming unsustainable. Carter and Chloe were running out of money, and their desperation was turning into outright malice. They needed a new target to make themselves feel powerful, and as long as I played the role of the struggling, quiet daughter, I was the perfect scapegoat. They didn't realize that my silence wasn't weakness, it was data collection. Every insult, every condescending remark, and every financial lie they told was logged away. I was just waiting for the right moment to let their own greed dismantle them. That moment arrived much sooner than any of us expected, triggered by a routine corporate expansion at my firm. The corporate expansion of Vance Enterprises required fresh blood. We were opening 2 highly lucrative executive positions at our New York headquarters, Senior Vice President of Corporate Acquisitions and Managing Director of Portfolio Management. The base salary started at $350,000, accompanied by a premium benefits package and significant performance bonuses. In the competitive New York job market, positions like these attract hundreds of elite resumes within hours. I instructed my head of human resources, Mr. Harris, to flag any notable applications immediately. I expected high-profile candidates from Ivy League schools and top-tier Wall Street firms.
I didn't expect my own family to take the bait, but greed has a way of overriding reality. On a Tuesday morning, Mr. Harris entered my office with 2 digital files. "Ms. Vance, you might want to look at these," he said, placing the tablets on my desk. "They just came through the executive portal." I scrolled through the applications. Carter had applied for the vice president role, presenting a resume bloated with fabricated titles from his failed startups. Chloe had applied for the managing director position, listing her social media consulting as extensive corporate leadership experience. It was an absolute joke. Neither of them possessed the qualifications to manage a local retail store, let alone a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio. But they saw the Vance name, the massive salary, and the social prestige, and they couldn't resist. Instead of rejecting them outright, I saw a strategic opportunity. This was the perfect environment to execute a character test. I wanted to see exactly how far their arrogance would go if they believed they had achieved ultimate corporate power while I remained at the bottom. I told Mr. Harris to hold their applications for a moment. Then I initiated my own play. I created a standard entry-level application under my own name for a basic junior analyst position within my own company. The following Sunday, I went to my parents' suburban home for dinner.
Before the food was even served, Carter and Chloe were already celebrating their assumed victories. "The market is all about leverage, Uncle Richard," Carter bragged, swirling a glass of wine. "Vance Enterprises is a monster firm, and my background makes me the perfect fit to lead their acquisitions team. I've already initiated contact with their HR department." Chloe chipped in, tossing her hair. "And they desperately need my modern branding perspective for their portfolio management. It's practically a done deal." My parents looked at them as if they had just won Nobel Prizes. I waited for the right moment to drop my anchor. "Actually," I said, putting down my fork, "I applied to Vance Enterprises this week, too." The room went dead silent for a second before Carter let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You? For what? The cleaning crew?" "A junior data entry analyst," I replied evenly, keeping my face completely expressionless. "It's an entry-level position in the back office." Margaret shook her head in deep disappointment. "Vivian, this is exactly what we mean. Your cousin and sister are applying to run the executive suites, and you are aiming for a desk in the basement. Have you no pride?" Richard leaned forward, his voice stern. "If you embarrass us during their interview process, Vivian, I won't overlook it. Chloe and Carter are about to elevate this family status. Don't drag them down with your mediocrity." "I won't interfere with their process," I said quietly.
Carter smirked, looking at me with pure disdain. "Just make sure you remember your place if we end up working in the same building, cousin. Business is business, and I don't give handouts to family members who can't keep up." I nodded, taking a mental note of every single word. The bait was taken. The trap was set. Now it was time to give them exactly what they thought they deserved. On Monday morning, I called Mr. Harris into my office at Vance Enterprises. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Harris, I want you to fast-track the applications for Carter and Chloe," I said, sliding their files across the desk. "Bypass the standard background checks and formal interviews. Draft their executive employment offers today." Mr. Harris blinked in surprise, reviewing the documents. "Miss Vance, with all due respect, their resumes are heavily fabricated. If we put them in charge of corporate acquisitions and portfolio management, they could cause serious financial liability within weeks." I leaned back in my chair, completely composed. "They won't be around long enough to cause a deficit, Mr. Harris. Just make sure the contracts contain the standard clause requiring them to legally sever all ties and resign from their current employment immediately upon acceptance. No grace periods, no safety nets." Mr. Harris nodded, understanding the shift in the corporate play. "Understood, Miss Vance.
And what about your application for the junior analyst position? I handed him a template I had written myself. Send this automated rejection letter to my personal email address. Make sure the timestamp matches theirs. The trap was sprung on Wednesday afternoon. My family's group chat immediately erupted with notifications. Carter posted a screenshot of his official offer letter for the senior VP position, followed by Chloe uploading her contract as managing director. The messages were filled with emojis, caps lock exclamation marks, and mutual congratulations. I waited exactly 10 minutes before dropping the screenshot of my automated rejection letter into the chat, adding a brief, simple text. I didn't make the cut. Glad you guys did. By Friday evening, my parents had organized an extravagant celebration dinner at an upscale suburban country club. They invited their entire social circle, desperate to showcase their sudden elevation in status. The private dining room was loud, filled with expensive perfume and champagne glasses funded by my father's mounting credit card debt. Margaret spotted me first. She intercepted me near the entrance, her face tight with a mixture of superficial pity and profound smugness. "We heard about your rejection, Vivian," she said, ensuring her voice carried across the room. "It's disappointing, but Vance Enterprises is an elite firm, and you simply don't possess the pedigree for it." Richard joined her, swirling a glass of high-end scotch. "Your mother is right, Vivian. Stop chasing corporations that are out of your league. Look at your sister and cousin. You need to accept your lane and stay in it." I walked past them toward the main table, where Carter and Chloe were holding court like corporate royalty. Carter had already purchased a new luxury watch on credit, adjusting his cuffs repeatedly. He looked up at me, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "Hey, Vivian."
"Hard luck on the analyst gig," he said, loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding guests. "But look at the bright side. Once Chloe and I settle into our executive suites on Monday, maybe we can get you a job managing the mailroom." Chloe laughed loudly, raising her glass. "Don't promise her too much, Carter. We can't have family members dragging down our corporate image." I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself, nor did I show a hint of anger. Emotional outbursts are for amateurs. I looked at their smug, celebrating faces and offered a polite, quiet nod. They had no idea that in their desperate rush to claim their fake victories, both Carter and Chloe had already submitted their immediate, unretractable resignations to their previous employers that morning. They had completely burned their bridges, believing they were stepping onto a golden escalator. They didn't realize they were standing on a trapdoor, and my hand was already on the lever. The celebration migrated from the country club's dining room back to my parents' suburban estate in Westchester for premium cigars and high-end scotch. Chloe and Carter were already acting like they owned the city, loudly discussing how they planned to redecorate their non-existent executive offices at Vance Enterprises. I sat quietly on the edge of the leather armchair, observing the spectacle. In business, before you execute a hostile takeover, you study your targets when they are at their most vulnerable, which is almost always when they are drunk on their own unearned success. "First thing Monday," Carter boasted, swirling his glass, "I'm putting a freeze on the junior analyst budget. We have too much dead weight at the bottom of the company, people who just sit there collecting a paycheck, contributing nothing." He shot a pointed look in my direction. My mother, Margaret, nodded at a green egg and poured herself more champagne. "Absolutely, Carter. You need to trim the fat. A successful company shouldn't look like a charity for the unmotivated." I remained silent, sipping my sparkling water. My lack of reaction seemed to frustrate Carter. Bullies rely on feedback. They need to see their venom hit the target to feel powerful. When I didn't flinch, he decided to escalate. He walked over to the kitchen island where a platter of prime, medium ribeye steaks from the catered dinner sat. He picked up a thick, greasy slice with his bare fingers. On his way back to the living room, he stopped near the entryway of the kitchen, right next to the heavy ceramic dog bowl belonging to my parents' golden retriever, Duke. Carter looked at me, a cruel, intoxicated smirk spreading across his face. "You know, Vivian," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter of the room, "I've been thinking about your career path." "You really don't have the stomach for the boardroom. You're just low level." With a slow, deliberate movement, Carter opened his hand. The greasy piece of steak slid from his fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud, landing inches away from Duke's water bowl. "You belong down there, Vivian. Eat up."
Carter said, leaning forward. Maybe then I'll consider you for a spot in the mailroom. The room went completely quiet. Duke trotted over, sniffing the meat, but Carter nudged the dog away with his leather loafer, keeping his eyes locked onto mine. Chloe let out a sharp, hysterical laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. My father, Richard, simply took another sip of his scotch, looking away, while Margaret adjusted her pearl necklace, silently endorsing the humiliation. They all expected me to break. They expected tears, an angry scream, or a dramatic exit that would solidify my role as the pathetic, defeated sister. I didn't do any of that. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my unbranded trousers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I walked over to Carter, stopping just inches from him. I looked him dead in the eye. The sheer absence of fear or anger in my expression made his smug smirk falter. I let a slow, cold smile spread across my face, the kind of smile a predator gives right before the strike. "Enjoy the weekend, Carter," I said quietly, my voice steady and devoid of any emotion. "Make sure you get plenty of rest."
Without waiting for a response, I picked up my coat and walked out the front door into the cool New York night. Behind me, the heavy wooden door clicked shut. My tolerance had officially reached its expiration date. My family had spent years treating me like a stepping stone. On Monday morning, they were going to learn exactly what happens when the stone they've been stepping on turns out to be the foundation of their entire existence. Storytelling at Vance Enterprises always moves with absolute precision. By 8:30 a.m., the trading floors were fully active, and the executive wing on the top floor was dead silent. I arrived early, using the private garage and the secure elevator that bypasses the main lobby. I didn't dress up for the occasion. I wore a simple charcoal gray cashmere sweater, black tailored trousers, and flat shoes. In the world of high finance, power isn't projected through a flashy designer dress. It is projected through the authority of your signature. I had instructed my executive assistant and Mr. Harris to escort my family directly into the main CEO office the moment they arrived. They weren't just showing up for a standard contract signing, they were treating the event like a victory parade. At exactly 9 a.m., I stood just outside the double mahogany doors of my private office, listening to the confident, muffled voices inside. When I pushed the doors open, the scene was entirely predictable. Carter was sitting in one of the leather visitor chairs, his legs crossed, adjusting a brand new luxury watch. Chloe stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass window, taking selfies with the Manhattan skyline. Margaret and Richard were standing near the massive executive desk, running their hands over the polished wood like tourists in a palace. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the ambient noise stopped. Storytelling turned around, her smile evaporating instantly when she saw me standing there in my casual clothes. "Vivian, what on earth are you doing here?" Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting through the room. She walked toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. "How did you even get past the front desk? This is a private executive floor." Richard stepped up beside her, his face darkening with immediate embarrassment. "Did you follow us here, Vivian? I explicitly warned you on Sunday night not to interfere with your sister and cousin's big day. This is the corporate headquarters of Vance Enterprises. Leave." I didn't answer right away. I walked past them toward the center of the room, keeping my hands in my pockets, my expression entirely neutral. Carter stood up from his chair, tucking his hands into his suit pockets to project authority. "Look, Vivian," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I get it. You're desperate. You got rejected for a low-level analyst job, and now you're here to beg us for a handout before we even sign our contracts. But this is Wall Street. You don't have the qualifications to work in this building, and I'm not going to ruin my reputation as the new senior vice president by helping a family failure." Chloe turned away from the window, crossing her arms and smirking. "Seriously, Vivian? It's embarrassing. You look like you just rolled out of bed. If the board sees you loitering up here, it makes all of us look bad. Just go before you make a scene." "I'm not making a scene, Chloe," I said evenly, looking directly at her. Richard stepped in front of me, blocking my view of the desk.
That's enough, Vivian. You are leaving right now. Carter is a high-level executive here now, and if he says you need to go, you go. Don't force us to watch security throw you out of the building. Think about the family name. The family name is exactly what I'm thinking about, Dad, I replied, my voice cool and completely devoid of emotion. Carter pulled out his phone, tapping the screen aggressively. I'm calling the security desk right now. I'm the new head of acquisitions, and I won't have trespassers disrupting my first hour on the job. You brought this humiliating moment on yourself, Vivian. I simply watched him dial, standing perfectly still in the center of my own room, waiting for the final players to enter. Carter held the phone to his ear, waiting for the security desk to answer. My father, Richard, stepped forward, his hand reaching out to grab my shoulder to force me toward the exit. You've crossed the line, Vivian, he muttered, his grip tightening on my arm. We are not letting you ruin this family's reputation in front of New York's elite. Before he could push me, the heavy mahogany doors swung open wide. The security guard Carter was trying to call didn't enter. Instead, Mr. Harris walked into the room, his expression completely professional. Behind him followed Sarah Jennings, the chief legal counsel for Vance Enterprises, and 3 senior members of the board of directors. They carried leather-bound folders and legal briefs, moving with the distinct confidence of people who manage billions of dollars. The sudden entrance changed the energy in the room instantly. Carter lowered his phone, quickly adjusting his jacket, assuming the executive welcoming committee had arrived. Margaret immediately straightened her pearls, putting on her best high society smile. Richard let go of my arm, stepping away from me to present himself to the board members. "Ah, Mr. Harris," Richard said, extending a hand. "Perfect timing. We were just dealing with a minor family disruption. My daughter here was just leaving. I am Richard Vance, Carter and Chloe's." Mr. Harris didn't look at Richard's extended hand. He didn't acknowledge Margaret's smile, nor did he glance at Carter or Chloe. The entire line of executives walked straight past them, ignoring their presence entirely. They formed a neat row directly in front of me. Mr. Harris took a slight step forward and bowed his head respectfully. "Good morning, Miss Vance," he said, his voice echoing clearly through the silent room. "The executive employment contracts for the new hires have been placed on your desk. The legal team has thoroughly vetted the immediate resignation clauses. We are simply waiting for your final signature before the onboarding process can officially begin." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of suffocating silence that occurs right before a structural collapse. Richard's hand remained frozen in the air. Margaret's smile vanished, her face turning a stark, ghostly pale. Carter looked from Mr. Harris to me, his mouth opening slightly but no sound coming out. Chloe dropped her phone, the device hitting the plush carpet with a soft thud. For years, they had known my last name was Vance, obviously, but New York is filled with corporate entities, and they had convinced themselves that Vance Enterprises belonged to some old money dynasty completely unrelated to the daughter they considered a failure. It had never once crossed their minds that the Vance on the glass skyscraper was me. I didn't say a word to break the silence. I walked past my father, my boots clicking softly on the floor. I stepped behind the massive mahogany desk, pulled out the high-backed leather executive chair, and sat down. I leaned back, resting my forearms on the polished wood, looking at the 4 people standing across from me. "Vivian." Margaret's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with a mixture of confusion and sudden terror. What is the meaning of this? Why are they calling you Miss Vance? Why are you sitting in that chair?" I looked at her, my expression completely flat. "Because this is my office, Mother. I built this firm from the ground up while you were busy financing Carter's failed startups." Every asset, every portfolio, and every executive position in this building exists because I allowed it. Carter took a frantic step forward, his hand shaking as he held his offer letter. "This is a mistake. This has to be a joke. The rejection letter, we saw it in the chat. You failed the analyst application." "I wrote that rejection letter myself, Carter," I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a scalpel. "It was a simple character test. I wanted to see exactly how you would treat your own family if you believed you were at the top of the world and I was at the bottom. And you gave me your definitive answer on Sunday night, right next to the dog bowl." The silence in the room was absolute. Margaret was the first to break, her face shifting instantly from terror to a desperate, manufactured warmth.
She stepped toward my desk, her hands extended for a fake embrace. "Vivian, honey," she stammered, her voice trembling with forced affection. "We had no idea. We were just testing your resilience. You know how much your father and I love you." I raised a single hand, stopping her dead in her tracks. "Do not step behind my desk, Margaret," I said coldly. Chloe clutched her handbag, her face completely pale. Carter's arrogance had vanished entirely. "Vivian, come on," he said, his voice cracking as he took a frantic step forward. "Sunday dinner was just a joke, a little competitive family trash talk. You can't actually take these jobs away from us. We genuinely need this." I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the two pristine, heavy paper executive contracts on my desk, the gold-embossed Vance Enterprises logo gleaming under the lights. I picked them up, ensuring Carter and Chloe watched my every movement. With slow, deliberate precision, I ripped the documents completely in half. The sharp, violent sound of tearing paper echoed off the glass walls. I folded the pieces and tore them again, dropping the shredded remnants into the wastebasket beside my chair. "There are no executive positions," I said evenly. "There never were. You didn't earn them, and you will never hold power in this building." Chloe let out a sharp, choked sob.
"Vivian, you can't do this. I already emailed my old boss on Friday morning and quit. I officially resigned for my position." "I know you did," I replied, my voice smooth and completely devoid of empathy. "I explicitly instructed Mr. Harris to require immediate, unretractable resignations before onboarding. You were so eager to boast about your fake promotions that you burned your own safety nets." Carter's face went entirely gray as the financial reality hit him. "My startup lease. I terminated it on Friday because of the promised signing bonus." "It gets worse for both of you." I concentrated my gaze directly at Carter. "Vance Enterprises maintains a tight compliance network across Wall Street and major digital agencies. Our chief counsel has already flagged your files for severe resume fraud and ethical violations. In the New York market, you are officially toxic. You are unemployed, unhireable, and your personal credit lines will likely freeze by the end of the afternoon." Richard stepped forward, trying to summon an old authority that no longer held any power. "Vivian, this is monstrous. We are your parents. You cannot destroy your family's careers over a personal grudge." I stood up slowly, looking down at them from behind my desk. Family doesn't stand by while their nephew throws food on the floor and tells their daughter she belongs next to a dog bowl, I said, my voice a deadly whisper.
"For years, you treated my quiet life as a failure because it didn't feed your superficial vanity. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a trophy. The illusion is over." I looked past them at Mr. Harris. "Consider this my official, permanent resignation from this family." Mr. Harris opened the mahogany doors, and two uniform-clad corporate security guards entered the room. "Escort these individuals out of the building immediately," I commanded. "If they ever step foot on Vance property again, have them arrested for trespassing." Margaret wept openly, while Richard tried to shout, but the guards firmly guided them out. Carter and Chloe followed like ghosts, completely dismantled by their own greed. The heavy doors clicked shut, restoring the absolute silence of the executive wing. I sat back down, pulling my morning portfolio forward. I opened my laptop and took a calm sip of my black coffee. The toxic weight was gone. My day was just beginning, and the market was waiting.